Tonight at 11, we've got a clearer picture of what we'll see on the ballot in November here in Indiana. Voters today choosing the nominees for marquee races, including Indiana governor and the state's congressional seats. We've got live team coverage of the Indiana primary. Dustin Grove's in the newsroom tracking the numbers. But let's begin tonight with Emily Longnecker.
So Republican Senator Mike Braun, now the Republican candidate for Governor Mike Braun, told his supporters tonight he plans to be the most entrepreneurial and accessible governor this state has ever seen.
After what turned out to be the most competitive and expensive Republican gubernatorial primary in Indiana's history so far. There were signs Tuesday night the primary was already in the rearview mirror for Braun, who's focused on November.
And I've already had three folks that I ran against aggressively call in, wish me well, want to get on board so we beat the other side of the aisle when it comes to the election in November.
In his acceptance speech to friends and supporters, Braun referenced the Founding Fathers several times, saying it was time for the individual states to get the country back on solid ground.
And sooner or later, you got to make sure government gets back to the people at the levels where you're going to be accountable and you can get things done. That's what I intend to do.
The primary contest saw the 6 Republican candidates debating on national issues like China and immigration. Democratic nominee for Governor Jennifer McCormick said the key to winning in November involves listening to Hoosiers about their concerns.
Yeah, we're going to get it done, and we're going to do that by sticking true to the issues that Hoosiers are concerned about, that being restoring women's reproductive rights and freedoms, education, high-paying jobs, and our environment. And those are the issues that Hoosiers want to talk about.
McCormick acknowledged the fight in front of her. A heavily Republican-leaning state, Indiana hasn't elected a Democratic governor in more than 20 years. For McCormick to change that, she knows it will take work.
We're having town halls. We're inviting everyone. We're opening those tents to big tents and making sure that everybody feels welcome. We're also using social media to make sure we're reaching a lot of people. So, we know what we're up against. It's going to be a battle, but we're ready.
McCormick said she plans to talk to Hoosiers in all of the state's 92 counties. Braun told supporters as senator he visited all 92 counties at least once a year and plans to do so again.
And where Jennifer McCormick was the only candidate for governor on the Democratic side, Mike Braun faced 5 other opponents. He called this primary feisty and competitive. He told his supporters tonight it's time for Republicans to come back together for the good of everyone. In Whitestown, Emily Longnecker, 13 News.
And congressional candidates also on the ballot this evening. Our Dustin Grove is keeping a close eye on the results coming in. So Dustin, what are you seeing?
We got a couple of very, very heated and expensive congressional races. Let's start with those, Scott. The 5th U.S. House District, and Victoria Spartz will keep her seat for now, beating her closest competitor, Chuck Goodrich, tonight. She will face off against the Democrat Deborah Pickett, who won the Democratic primary. On to U.S. House District 6, former Indianapolis mayoral candidate Jefferson Shreve took that tonight over his closest challenger, Mike Speedy. They have just blanketed the airwaves the last couple of weeks with campaign ads. Jefferson Shreve taking House District 6, that vacated by Greg Pence, who's not running again. U.S. House District 3 up in northern Indiana, Democrat Kylie Adolph will face off against Republican Marlon Stutzman in November. Also, a couple of state house races of note here. An upset in State Rep District 13. The incumbent Sharon Nagel upset tonight. Matthew Commons will be the Republican on the general ballot in November for that race, and former Colts punter Hunter Smith winning his race for State Representative District 24. Now, quickly, I want to show you in the race for governor just how much of a sweep Mike Braun had in the state of Indiana. All of these counties in brown and orange, Mike Braun took those counties. The only exceptions were Vanderburgh County, which is home to Lieutenant Governor Suzanne Crouch. She took her home county, and then neighboring Warwick County as well. But the only other exception was Marion County, where Brad Chambers won. But look at that. Very, very, very close. Only 100 or so votes difference between Chambers and Braun. Another interesting thing has to do with the race for president. Let me show you really quick here. And you can see that Donald Trump, the presumptive nominee in November, took Indiana in all of these counties, red and maroon. However, look at this. Nikki Haley, who dropped out of the race a couple of weeks ago, still garnered 22% of the vote. And in fact, if you zoom in here to Marion County, she took 35% of the vote. In fact, Nikki Haley took more than 30% of the vote tonight in 4 counties: Marion, Hamilton, Boone, and Tippecanoe County. Now, if you go to the race for president 4 years ago, you can see that Donald Trump beat Joe Biden by 16 points. So you can bet that Democrats will be working to get those votes, the people who voted, you could call it a protest vote for Nikki Haley, to get those votes to try and close that gap in November. Back to you, Scott.
All right, Dustin Grove doing a great job breaking down the results. Our political expert, Dr. Melissa Borja, is in studio with us tonight. You called this a consequential election. Why was it that way tonight?
Well, there were a lot of open seats, a lot of candidates, and a lot of competition. We had 3 out of 9 congressional seats open. We had the most competitive gubernatorial race in the Republican Party in 20 years. And we had a relatively small number of voters, about 25% of registered voters, making decisions about leaders that will shape the course of our state for the next 4 to 8 years.
What impact did former President Trump have on the Indiana primary?
Well, one thing we know from today's results is that Hoosiers, a lot of Hoosiers in the Republican Party like Trump, and they like politicians associated with Trump. Trump won handily, 78%, and Mike Braun, his ally, did very well tonight too. We also know that not all Republican Hoosiers supported Trump. 22% still voted for Nikki Haley, even though she suspended her campaign 2 months ago. So we'll see what happens in November with those voters.
And how did events around the world impact the results that we've been seeing around the Hoosier state?
We saw global events shape Congressional District 5, debates about Ukraine, Congressional District 8, debates about Israel. And Democratic Hoosiers didn't have a chance to vote non-committed, but if they had, we might have seen Israel politics shape that vote as well.
All right, Dr. Melissa Borja, our election analyst tonight, thank you so much for joining us and giving that perspective for us. Well, we've got good news tonight for Pike Township Schools. A $15 million operating referendum for the district passed 59 to 41%. That money will go towards staff recruitment and professional development, plus school safety and security projects. You can find our full coverage of the primary election online, including all of the results. We've got it posted for you on WTHR.com/elections.